Oh, thank you, Yvonne. And so mine is energetic enigma. And my superpowers is I have a lot of energy, which y'all are going to see today. And number two, I love asking questions. I love challenging systems and ideas through asking tough but exciting questions. And unsurprisingly, I'm at a level 3. I've been reading all the books. I love Lord of the Rings. I love Star Wars. You can tell by the fact that I'm sitting in the Millennium Falcon that these are things that I have been waiting for my entire life. So I am full sprint, swan diving through that bad boy and grabbing my facilitator go bag, ready to get in there. So a couple other things to think about. Seeing some touching of the fluid and captain of spaceship, voyager to other worlds and times. I love that. Thank you. Thank you. Terraforming Mars is a phenomenal game. Thanks for sharing that. So again, as we continue, I invite you to answer these questions. And then I'm going to drop a bonus question in chat for folks too. Of this bonus question: what are the tools in your magic based on your persona? What are the things you have with you? So one of the ways I like to ask this is, if you had a superpower you couldn't fight crime with, what would it be? And how does it relate back to your super facilitator persona? So for example, one of the things I love to do is whiteboards. You can't see because I'm on the Millennium Falcon, but I have 6 whiteboards around me in my home office because I love to doodle. I love to draw. And most importantly, I like to visualize the arguments and questions I'm making. And this would be my, like, in my facilitator go bag, I'd be able to pull out one of those large whiteboards that you could write on, and a whole set of markers and coloring pencils. So think about that as we move forward. All right, keep dropping your notes and chats, folks. It's again great to see listening problem solver, poking the fluid, one on gaming. So we got a spectrum of comfortability with gaming. All right, so whatever you're deciding about this strange fluid, it makes a decision for you. And again, naming in this space, this is not a best practice, especially a trauma-informed practice to do with young people, where you give them a choice and then you have the same result anyway. If I was doing this with a classroom or a group of young people, I would break them out by their comfort level to have an initial discussion about their experience with games, and then scaffold the conversation up in order to then build the knowledge in the room, and then even have young people teach each other, or coach each other, or even play a couple games. For today, all of you are being pulled through the portal, whether you want to or not. I apologize, but as this purple fluid emerges from the wall, whether you're running away to get help, you poked it a little bit, you start to feel yourself consumed and pulled through, very similar to Neo in the Matrix. And that's where we're going, folks. We're going into the gaming matrix, where you are hurling through plane interdimensional space. And so with that, as you're going through, this information is just naturally uploaded into your brain. And this information is coming to you now. All right. So some of you may notice I love Among Us. It's a great game. I strongly recommend it. Social deduction game where you don't trust people, but then also you have to really figure out who's the imposter. We're going to be building trust as opposed to fracturing it today. But anyway, so this is the information that's getting uploaded. We're stepping out of this narrative a little bit to help build the knowledge in the room. So I love games, but one of my favorite places in the world is the Strong Museum in Rochester, New York. It's the National Museum of Play. And part of the reason I love it is they have a full arcade. Most museums are like, don't touch the exhibit. And then this is like, no, play all of our games, please. And that is my favorite thing in the world. They also have a full Bernstein Bears section. They also had Sesame Street in their museum, which was just like dope. Anyway, outside of the Game Hall of Fame is this quote: "Play is the brain's favorite way of learning." And this has been so resonant for me because I think back to the moments when I learned the most. The sandbox that I dumped sand in and had my back hauler digging, and then eventually transitioned into my mom's bulbs, which, well, I thought I was digging up onions, but no. She loves to tell that story that we just destroyed our garden and turned it into a mud pit. But then Legos, one of my favorite things in the world. Again, you can't see, but behind me, I have the Razor Crest from The Mandalorian. The ways that you learn structures and and interactions with tools is so important in the way that we play and interact. And so this is a metronome. This is the tempo in which kind of guides this work, and finding the ways that we encourage play, manipulation of things and ideas without a direct intention or objective, but then we can do it intentionally as well. And this is where we're coming to the core learning of what we're going to cover in this information download. And that's what's in a game, what is gamification, and what's the difference between gamification and game-based learning? And then finally, what are the core competencies of gameplay? What are the passive skills and social development that happens with game playing and in a way that builds social emotional learning skills and competencies? So the first part is this idea of what makes a game, right? Like games have components to them that make them significant. And on the screen, you can see that there's a relevance and implication for players. There's a reason they're joining the game. If you're coming to play Clue, you're trying to uncover a murder. If you're coming to play Monopoly, you're learning capitalism. You're learning how to buy a property and sell and trade. You're also learning a little bit of like economic and personal finance in there too. So there's this why do players want to join, and what's the implications for joining? Then there's these goals and objectives. This is kind of like the way that you move through the game. They're the milestones that lead you to how to be successful, right? Monopoly, develop a monopoly. Clue, find out who the killer is, right? This is the steps along the way. So when you're in Clue, you know that you need to figure out the room, the murder weapon, and then also the other components there. Whereas Monopoly, it's like you have to buy properties and get sections of them, and then ultimately be the last one standing. And so within this, there's also rules and boundaries. When you roll doubles, you get to go twice, but if you roll it twice, you go to jail. Or once you're in jail, how do you get out? And then if you land on, oh my God, free parking, what do you get when you get, right? So there's rules and boundaries in how we navigate these. And then finally, there's rewards and fun. So what are we getting? I talk about this a lot, but we villainize games like World of Warcraft. But my argument is, instead of villainizing World of Warcraft, what do we recognize that World of Warcraft does for young people across the globe, where they want to play it for 12 hours a day? What's going on there? There's an element that it's addictive, but it's also providing something. People vote with their feet. And if they're attracted to something, I don't say, ooh, that's terrible. I go, what are they doing that I'm not? And so when we think about this in the context of learning environments, this looks very similar to curriculum development, right? Instructional design has these same components, where it's a backward design process where we say, all right, what do we want young people to learn? How do we get them there? What are the ways in which they prove what they know? And then how do we make it relevant and important to them? And then these last two of what are the rewards that we're offering, and how are we having fun while doing it? So game design is a parallel process to curriculum design. And that's where this really comes out. And this is where gamification and game-based learning is really exciting. So this is a young person I got to work with. This is out Maine's Rainbow Weekend at Camp Kiev Wavis, and a group of young people and I went up and we did a workshop called Using Fantasy to Survive Reality. And this was a game-based learning experience, because what we did is we worked with young people in this space where they were running games and simultaneously talking about mental health strategies. So how can you use games as an outlet for caring for mental wellness, as a way of exploring the ways that we exist in space and build community and connections with others? And so game-based learning is where you play a game, and it's the passive learning or intentional moments through that game in which you invest in, versus gamification, where you take a pre-existing learning experience, let's say it's like an Algebra 2 curriculum, and you find ways to gamify it, where you use the principles on the previous page in order to accentuate the aspects of a game. For example, I know a teacher in Wisconsin who every year he breaks his class up into a different narrative setting. One of the settings he used when I talked with him was he broke the class into groups of 4 or 5, and they were all a pirate ship. And so he would get them little models. He took old bottle caps and stamped them out to make gold. And throughout the adventure, as they did homework, they would get gold. that they could spend that on different resources and tools for exams or to get out of homework, all of these ways. And then, so for example, if they had a homework assignment, what it would be, instead of saying like, all right, solve these problems 1 through 20, it would be, all right, you're searching the island and find a chest. In order to unlock it, you have to tell me this equation or solve this equation. That subtle twist, right? That subtle twist goes from, oh my God, another paper, to I'm getting treasure. Like, this is so exciting. You don't have to change too much. It's about creating that narrative setting where people are really excited. There's a new game out that me and my brothers are playing, and literally half of it is just like chopping wood. You go to a tree, you click on it, and you cut down the tree. That's literally it. There is no other reward other than watching your little experience dial go to the next level and be like, cool, now I'm level 70 in wood cutting. It's wild to think that's what we could be doing in other places. I could be spending that time practicing my violin, but no, I'm clicking on my computer. Why? What are the components that provides me, right? So when we think about gamification, that's the crux of it. How are we integrating game design elements into the existing learning environments, where game-based learning is using a game to teach? This comes to the cycles of gamification and game-based learning. And so on the far left, we have complementary games. These are games you can use as like rewards or in other environments. So let's say someone gets their homework done early or their classwork early, and you say, all right, you get to go over here and play this game. This could also be just the passive ways in which like you use Jeopardy in the classroom. And this is starting to then move us up along themed, where theme games are going to be the games in which they are connected and related into the content that you're using. For example, you might use Scrabble to teach spelling, or you might use Monopoly in your classroom to teach like economics or personal finance. These are theme games. Then we start to move into experiential. This is what you might think of when we think of the traditional like ropes course or leadership camp, where people are going through an experience and thinking about what is the learning that comes out of that. This is also where the game we're going to play today, role-playing games, tabletop role-playing games, fit in, which then start to lead into this design. How do young people go from just a passive experiencer of a learning experience to the designer, sitting in the driver's seat of what their learning experience will look like? And that's game design. And they're parallel because, as we saw, right, game design and curriculum and learning design are very, very similar. They're interconnected. So this is the balance we're going to find ourselves in today, is this experiential into design, where we can invite young people to take ownership of their education through game playing. And that's through my favorite category of game, tabletop role-playing games. These are games like Dungeons and Dragons, but at their core, and what you see in media and on the internet is, you know, people slaying dragons and fighting evil things, which is definitely part of it. And I love that aspect. But really, the core and crux of tabletop role-playing games is they are collaborative storytelling games that invite players to become the protagonists by overcoming challenges and situations developed by a facilitator known as a game master. And so in these games, you can have a range of players from 3 to 7. And one of those players is the facilitator, so the game master, who I will be playing today in our story. And they're going to create that central plot or narrative. And then the players assume the role of a character and use that avatar in order to make decisions and drive the plot. So basically, what I like to say about this, think of your favorite Netflix show or your favorite Hulu show, your favorite movie. And was there a moment in that story in which the character made a decision? You're like, why are you doing that? Why? I would have made such a better decision for you, right? This is your moment to step into that place and make those decisions for that character. And we'll talk more about why that's so significant. So in these games, there's 3 steps. A lot of it can feel really intimidating because it's like, oh, I hate role playing. I went to that training once and they made me play a teacher who's really mad at a student and I had to yell at him. It's like, that's not what this is about. It's similar, but so much more fun, partly because it's fictional. So much of the role playing that happens is real life scenarios. That makes it awkward and uncomfortable. I hate that too. And I love role playing. And so I break it down in this cycle. We have describe, we have decide, and then roll. So in a scenario, the game master describes something. So I'm running right now with a group of friends in Portland, a Portland-based adventure in a system called Monster of the Week, which is based off of serial television shows like NCIS, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Supernatural. So there's this mystical world behind the normal one. So the first adventure is going to take place out at Thompson Points, and it's going to be at a brew festival. Don't tell them this, all right? You don't know the players, so you can't, but just don't tell them this. Keep this under wraps. So they're going to start at Thompson's Point, and it's going to be a brew festival. And then all of a sudden people start to be acting really strange. And what's happening is underneath is this yeast monster that has grown out of this bacterial organism. So they're going to be at Thompson's Point doing what their characters do. And I'm going to describe a scene where all of a sudden you see a person who is turning in their drink tokens for some poutine. And then all of a sudden they start to shift and shake and wiggle. And then I'll go, what do you want to do? And this is that decide. This is the crux, the power of role-playing games. They make that decision on what happens next. So they might say, I run to grab help. I rush up and try and like detain this person, or I want to know more about what's going on. So once they make that decision as a group, we then roll. So a lot of role-playing games have an element of luck. So you roll a physical dice. I have a whole dice bag that I always keep close to me. And in this system, it's 2d6, and they roll that, and then we decide if they're successful. So let's say they are successful. We enter back into the cycle, and now I'm describing the next moment. So let's say they run and grab help. You search frantically and find a security guard who is standing idly, leaning against on his phone. And then we're back into it. What do you want to do? How do you get this security guard's help? And then we're back into it. And the cycle keeps going. So it's really elegant and simple. That doesn't make it easy. I want to name that. Role-playing is hard. It's a skill that you have to build. And it can be done in lots of different ways. And just to name, there's a difference between simple and easy. There's a lot of things that are simple that are not easy. For example, I know I got to eat my fruits and vegetables. That's really hard when French fries are a thing. But again, it's a simple concept. It's hard to enact. So now through this, we begin to unlock core competencies. And when I say core competencies, I'm talking about social emotional learning skills. These are social emotional skills that we are getting really popular. And I want to break them down because beyond just the buzzwords of like empathy building, what does that actually mean? And how do we actually do it beyond collaboration and communication? So the first one is self-awareness. And so in role-playing games, there's an incredible need to recognize oneself in order to occupy this other character, this other avatar. And that happens through self-reflection and through questions. And one of my favorite things to do is at the start of each session, I ask a check-in question, and then I follow up with, how does that relate to your character? And so many people build characters based off of aspects of themselves or things they wish they were. And it builds this ability to reflect on, how is this character different from me? Which then allows us to turn into this next step of empathy and perspective taking. All right, here are the components about myself that are in this character. What's different? And then developing deep empathy for this character, right? Like this fictional thing that just came out of my brain. And then all the other characters that I'm working with, all the other players. And there's these two layers to it. There's both the character interaction, because when we're at a table, we're not saying, all right, I as Gabe am gonna is telling this character to do this. No, I talk as this character. I'm like, all right, this security guard by the name of Brad starts talking to you and says, what can I do for you? Like, stop bothering me. I'm on my phone, right? I'm embodying that character, but then also stepping out to be able to say, hey, Brad's being really aggressive to you. I gave him not aggressive to you. And that takes this really powerful skill to be able to differentiate and toggle between these emotional experiences and then communicate it, which leads into this next one of collaboration. At their core, these games are collaborative. They are not competitive. Some people, like myself, are really competitive and will find a way, but you're successful when the team's successful. Much like collaborative sports, right? So like a track team, while you're operating individually, you all collectively add to the story, to the narrative, to the point pool. And so there's this really importance of being able to communicate and work with others just like the way we value traditional sports in our society. It's the same thing. Or a drama team who's working to put on a performance, right? Or a band. These are all components of these games. And then resiliency building. So we talk about resiliency in a lot of ways, but really the core for it for me and the way it shows up in these games is how do we respond and navigate failures, hardships, things that feel like a block to us developing. And I love role-playing games, specifically Monster of the Week, because when you fail, you gain experience. Other systems, you gain experience by like killing things. And I hate that. And in Monster of the Week and other role-playing games, you succeed, you level up, you grow when you fail. That is such an important message. Failure is not the end. Failure is the beginning. Because what it also does narratively is when we fail, we then get to find a new way, a new solution to the problem. So very literally, it is the start of the next cycle. And with that describe, decide, roll, when you fail, there's a description, then there's another decision, right? And it teaches that inherently without being too intentional. There's a couple of additional ingredients that I think are really, really important and are at the crux of these. That's imaginative play, fun, and planning. I have spent 3 hours listening to my players plan 14 different ways that they're going to storm the castle. It is sometimes really boring for me, but oh my God, I've never seen young people be so detail oriented in the way that they go about all the different. All right, what is the rotation of the guards? All right, how are we going to scale this wall? How tall is the wall? What kind of ladder do we need? Are we going to use rope? Where is this? Where is that? It's just like, I don't know. Like I hadn't planned for that. And yet you're considering all of these possibilities I never could. And that gets into this idea of imaginative play. One of the things that I've experienced as growing up in Maine and then going away to college is there's this like exhaustive wave of beating the imagination out of me. And one of the things I love working with young people is they can come up with solutions and things I never thought of. And if we encourage that, if we actively invest in that imagination, right, we are solving problems we never knew existed. And that's what young people bring to the table. And that's what role-playing games unlock is how do we solve the interdimensional portals that don't exist yet? But right, like if we had been asking these questions before we recognize the impacts of global change, climate change, maybe we would have been investing in solutions to problems that didn't exist yet. And that's what imaginative play can do for us is we can envision different worlds and situations and begin to construct solutions. And then I'm going to keep coming back to it. We do not value fun enough. I'm thinking about how exhausted I am at the state of the world, how exhausted I am working in communities that are struggling with various challenges like mental health, the opioid crisis, with food insecurity, with all of these challenges. And having an outlet to have fun, smile, laugh fills my cup, right? We think about self-care in a lot of ways. For me, it's not a bathtub. For me, it's not reading a book. It's sitting around a table with people exploring creative solutions to challenges, and that's fun. The last part I want to name in this is diversity, equity, and belonging in games. So Dungeons & Dragons, which is the most famous tabletop role-playing game, even games like Settlers of Catan, are rooted in some deeply problematic narratives, particularly settler colonialism. A lot of them are white dominated. And so we need to consider how this shows up. For example, in a lot of D&D worlds, goblins are used as like experience fodder. You kill a lot of them. In my worlds and in the things that I build, I'm really careful to talk about how systems of oppression show up. Dungeons and Dragons was made by a straight white cis dude, middle class white dude. Like there are going to be problematic narratives and tropes in those. However, the gaming industry is becoming increasingly more diverse, which is really exciting. I'll share this in the resources in the Google Drive when we get done, but there's a phenomenal podcast called Fresh Out of Tokens, which is about diversity in gaming. I love it because of the arcade theme, and then like tokenism in games has always been really problematic. But so we need to acknowledge how these tropes show up in games. For example, the ways that orcs in a lot of games are showed as very like tribal, which is a really problematic representation of indigenous communities. and acknowledging and naming the ways that we are occupying Wabanaki land is really, really important here in Maine. And the ways we can honor and inform ourselves through games is really, really exciting to me, because games provide an outlet to explore the ways that oppression and marginalization can show up in fictional settings. Number one, it provides an outlet for folks who experience that on a day-to-day basis to have an escape from that. And when I start my games, I ask, how do we want to navigate systems of oppression in our game? Do we want to ignore them because we spend all day having to navigate them? Or do we want to challenge them and fight them in this? And that allows players that voice and choice to decide for themselves how they want to navigate it. Also, what this does is we can now explore those tropes, especially in controlled spaces. And this comes back to some trauma-informed practices. How are we building in that so that we're not triggering events or past traumas that young people might be bringing to that table? And we don't need to know them to do this well, but it's something to consider, and it's something we need to navigate. All right, the chat has been blowing up and I have not been following it. I am so sorry. This looks fantastic. And there's going to be, we're going to come to a moment where we'll have a time for folks to come off mute, and that is coming up. All right, I'm taking a breath. Any questions that you want to ask this interdimensional Titan supreme being that uploaded this information to your brain? Feel free to just come off mute and join us in the space if you have questions.
I have a question. To what extent have you interacted with people who are like resisting the game, like resisting letting themselves get into that creative space to participate?
Yeah, great question. Mostly that's adults I play with, to be perfectly honest. Young people really don't. So there's lots of outlets to join a game. You don't have to be a player who is one of the protagonists. Think about the ways this might connect to artwork, to map making, to so I have this phenomenal podcast mic, which I don't think you can see. But so one time we recorded our game and one of the young people wanted to do audio recording. So they were the ones who navigated that. One of my players loved to draw characters, just loved to draw. And so they were our like graphic designer for our campaign. Someone else was like our storyteller. So they wrote down the events of the adventure and would start each session by sharing that out, kind of like a narrator. Then there's like, you can do map making. I have this really great edition. If you're interested, it's a collaborative map making activity where it's actually rooted in geography, city planning. So you actually build like a whole world, but you start with, where's your capital city? Why is it here? What are the resources that make it here? And so that's another way people can participate in these games and slowly build into that. Yeah, so I'm happy to share and talk through that. I have a YouTube video that I upload. It's called Cure for the Modern Murder Hobo, which is a phrase in, I don't like it, but it's a phrase in Dungeons and Dragons where people just go around killing things. And it's like really, again, problematic. But yeah, happy to talk more about that. And you can reach out to me for some of those resources and facilitating that activity. Great question. Anything else?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I really liked the example that you gave about the math teacher giving this like reward and of the treasure chest, like if they solve these things. And you wouldn't think that in theater you'd have to like, get some kids into it. You'd think they would be, but some of my older kids, well, not older, but they're in that 7th, 8th grade range. It's kind of hard for them to let go of their, I don't know how to explain it, but they feel like by taking on a character, it makes them too vulnerable.
Yes. Yeah.
And and that manifests itself as like resistance to the game, essentially, like the game being the play or the theater that we're doing. And I don't know, I would love some sort of ideas about like the rewards of working on a play. Like, how can I make that more game like, okay, if we do this scene, then here's what the game is going to give you. And my brain is I'm not really a game designer, so I don't really know what to do with that.
Yeah, that's really great. And I think this comes back to Robin's question too. And I think it expands on the answer I gave is you got to know what the rewards are for your players. You gotta know why they're there. And that invites you to ask some questions of like, what brings you here? Why are you excited to be part of theater? What are some of the things you might not like about this? And then you can begin to scaffold out those rewards, and it's going to look different for each player. So one of the things in role-playing games is you do this evaluation of what your player is. And so in D&D, it's like the power gamer, someone who loves to use the rules to make the most powerful character. One player is the social gamer, right? They're there just to hang out with their friends. They don't care about the game, right? And that was one of the hardest things to learn is they didn't care about what I was doing. They cared about the other people around the table. This was their opportunity to hang out with friends and just get away from something and like chill, right? And so once you do that kind of like stock analysis, that's terrible. Like asking those questions to be like,
personality analysis.
Yeah. Why are you here? Then you can begin to figure out how you reward them, right? So for the social gamer, I rewarded them with social time and we would just go eat together and we would take a break from the game. For the power gamer, I created situations in which the way that they played the game maximized the way that they were able to use their character, right? And this is the same thing that's true here. And the other thing is you have to, like, the vulnerability element is really important. Role-playing games and occupying another character is incredibly vulnerable, which is like counterintuitive because it's not you, right?
Yeah,
but it is.
It's
we're not taught to be silly. We're not taught to lean into that of being okay making a fool of ourselves. It's one of the things I've perfected because I'm just a ridiculous human being, but it took a lot of like getting over the fact that like some people are going to think I'm strange and that, you know, like I'm still wrestling with that. But so the way you can do that is scaffolding trust, because that comes back to, I don't trust the people here. I'm worried how this is going to perceive me. And so how are you building relationships and trust at the table? And this to me is scaffolding. Again, it centers relationship building, saying, all right, what do you like? What's a value you bring to this space, right? And how is that value showing up in the way? And someone might say, well, I really value like social perception. And so those are some of the steps and ways. And I'm sure all of you are really good at relationship building. And how do you invite your class or your team to do the same thing?
Okay.
Great questions.
Thank you. Wow. This is really amazing. Thank you.
Well, thank you. All right. So we'll come back to questions, I promise you. But I promise you games. We're gonna continue our adventure. All right. I don't know if we're gonna be able to like go through the whole scenario, but we might stop right when we're getting started, which hurts my heart. But you know what? We're gonna do it. So whether you jumped into the portal or tried to walk away from it, you've been transported into this alternative reality. During the journey, the previous information that was downloaded into your brain is unlocking new powers and abilities. And this is when you fully realize your super facilitator persona. So disoriented and slightly confused, you look around and you find yourself standing in a small shuttle, much like the Millennium Falcon, with other super facilitators, the folks in this room. You see a terminal with a large screen that projects a holographic flight path through the Milky Way to Space Station 38 in Sector B, where you will help design the extra dimensional school. Before you know it, you feel the shuttle shake as it enters a black hole. Through a large viewport, you see the stars begin to expand and pull back as you travel through hyperspace. In the blink of an eye, the starscape returns to normal, and you see a magnificent space station. That has to be the school you were recruited to create. You then hear an animatronic voice perk up. Welcome and congratulations, super facilitators, to the important task of designing the perfect school. I am Artificial Life Form ALF, or ALF. I organized your debrief and will be supporting the remainder of your orientation. You should be to work in no time. Wait a minute. It seems as though we've had some technical difficulties. The space station has experienced a disaster. Part of our life support system and technicians are currently floating outside the ship. Oh dear. And sure enough, you glance out the viewport and see a shadowy figure floating through space away from the space station. Following them is a large piece of metal that you assume to be the life support system. ALF speaks back up. I'm afraid that without the life support, your work would be rather difficult. I suppose your reception will have to wait. What do you do? This is the classic question as we came in that cycle of narrative play. There was a description. You are on some kind of shuttle going to achieve this task, which is no longer relevant if you can't breathe on the space station. So now you have your character, you have your powers, you have this facilitator bag that you were thinking about. And you're now standing here with other super facilitators trying to figure out what to do. And this is the moment where the game starts. This is the moment where you all take over. Does anybody have an initial idea of what they might want to try as their super facilitator persona? Feel free to come off mute and throw some ideas out. Rob, what you got for us?
I think my first thought was it's got to have some brainstorming. So I'm thinking like we've got to find a leader first of all, and then do some brainstorming.
Yeah,
maybe the leader will come out of the brainstorm, but we've got to at least get our heads together.
Yeah, we need some stability. We need to like figure out what's going on. So this is a way you can play, right? There's 3 different levels you can like engage. You notice I was talking in first person as ALF, right? I'm comfortable. I'm excited to do that. Other people might not. So you can talk in third person and say, I would like to do this, similar as Rob just modeled for us. So thank you. And so, and I can narrate and pick up from there. So Rob turns to the group and says, hey, we need to think about what to do. We need someone to like help us make decisions. What should we do? So you all see Rob do this. How does your character react?
We need to go find some cables and get some suits so we can go out of the station.
So Katie begins to like look around. What are the resources and tools I have available? You see across on the wall. So this is where a role might come into play. You are looking around. Let's see what you find. So to do this, we're going to play a little game to see if you're successful. Normally we would roll a dice because rolling a dice through Zoom requires technical complications. We're going to play moose or bunny. I'm going to go below the screen and I'm going to do moose or bunny. You all have to guess. Okay. If majority gets it right, you'll find the things you're looking for. Majority gets it wrong, you'll find some things just might not be as helpful. Any questions about what we're about to do? All right.
Are we unmuting for that?
You're gonna make this. This is gonna be how I know you're guessing correctly. All right. Good question. Good question. All right. I'm going down and picking. All right. I have it selected. What do you think? It was moose. What do we got? I can't tell. Megan's like, oh, wait, I'm going to wait till the last minute. No, just teasing. I think we had majority rabbit. 1, 2, 3, 4. Uh-oh. So Katie, as you're looking around, you are not finding anything like, you're not finding cables, you're not finding spacesuits, but you do find like a glass case that says break in case of emergency. And so yeah, crack the glass and you look inside, and inside is a user manual. Oh, how helpful is that? But also you find like a lifesaver pack, as well as a key to what you see in the corner is like a computer cart. You know, those computer carts we push around every school. You find one of those. So what do you do now? So we just did a roll. Now we're back in describe. I described what you found. Now we're back in decide. What do you want to do? Rob's asked for some brainstorming leadership. Katie jumped into action to try and find something and found a couple tools that she brings back and shows to the group. What else are we doing?
I want to know entrance, exit. Like, how are we getting in? How are we getting out? What's the airtight situation?
Great question. So underneath that holographic projector that I described, you see Alf's like holographic and like where the speaker is coming out of, and you see an interactive display. And so on it, you can press a button and up pops a schematic of both your ship and the space station. And so on your ship, it's just for purposes, you're on the Millennium Falcon. So out the back, there is an air docking station where you can jump into and it'll open up into space. There's a landing ramp. And then there's also like the cockpit where you all are standing now. It's a little bit bigger than in the movies because we need space for all these people. And the space station. So the space station is a large, like circular rotating thing. It looks a bit like an ice cream cone where it scaffolds down. And then at that tip, you notice there's a red like X blinking on the screen. That's where it seems this life support system broke off and is now floating into space, where you might need to reattach it. What else? What else do you want to do?
I think on the same thinking as James, like I would want to get more information. Like I would want to ask Alf, like if he knows like what exactly went wrong, like if there's a specific system we have to fix, or can give us an direction.
Yeah, so you ask Alf and Alf responds, unfortunately, I do not possess that information. However, I can attempt to patch you into the station administrator. Would you like me to direct a tight beam? I'll take that as a yes. So you hear some static. It's very much like walkie-talkie radio thing. And so you hear over the comm a voice come over. This is Lux, the space station administration. Looks like we got a little bit of trouble. What? You think you can go get our engineers out there? Maybe the life support? Hello?
Yeah, I think that's the plan. I think we just got here, so we don't know where the suits are or how to leave or what we need to do. I think we need a little help.
Well, that's good because we need help too. Well, we're losing oxygen fast, folks. I think there might be able to do you have anybody on there with technical engineering or arts and crafts? Do we have an art teacher on board who can fashion us together? Maybe a woodshop teacher who could put together some kind of equipment for us?
No, we're all ELA teachers. We have no use at all. So
oh no, disaster.
We're gonna play rock, paper, scissors to decide who's gonna grab the one suit by the exit door, and that person's gonna go find a cable.
All right. Well,
plenty of snacks for whoever's gonna go.
Snacks are always good to have.
Did we not have a captain who piloted our shuttle? How did our shuttle get here? Where are they in it?
Technology is a fantastic thing where
Okay.
autopilot exists, and Gabe didn't think about that. So
who's stepping up to drive, guys, to go get the stuff?
I'll go. I've been working here for the least amount of time, so
you're the
If we're playing
Taylor,
that
sorry.
card, James, I think Katie and I are up on the sacrifices for that as well.
I'm used to being the first. Yeah, never mind.
What was
Alright.
the materials that we had again? It was like a user manual and a cart. And
yeah,
what,
you have a computer cart, so they're like interdimensional tablets that you have access to. You have 36 of them, which you're going to have 38 students, so you got to figure out how to do that. Sorry, just to make life more difficult. But I think for simplicity's sake, maybe you're able to find also like an emergency station where you also find this spacesuit that Rob was referring to. In that emergency station also, because I'm nice and I'm a benevolent and kind game master, you also find a hydrospanner, which is just like a catch-all tool. You find an anti-gravity wrench and a pocket mass generator, which creates a central pocket of gravity. Additionally, I think that if you were to scavenge from your ship, you could find additional tools and metals that you might be able to package together, which was Lux's, the Space Administration recommendation is what could you build with the things you have?
okay, so I don't know if this is possible, but maybe we need to increase our gravity in order to draw the floating life support stuff back to us. So we need to increase our density, I think. with the metals and by creating maybe a mini black hole. I'm not sure if it's possible, but with this gravity tool that you mentioned, maybe we can compress the metals into something and then use the gravity thing to make it stronger. I don't know.
Yeah. So creating some kind of contraption in order to pull the folks to you. You also had someone asking about a pilot. So maybe you could pilot the shuttle closer so that would make that easier to grab them. Robin, I saw you. Yeah.
You're wearing a belt and your belt buckle's metal, and I've got a bracelet and your backpack has a strap. What else do we have that we can pull together to figure this out with that gravity idea?
Can we use the 36 computers? Like if we all like held onto as many computers as possible and we're all like really close together to like form this sort of metal gravity center. I don't know if it works that way, but I envision us playing sardines, like and becoming one like blob of metal gravity.
Like create a panel using our tablets.
Yeah, that's it.
Like just a big panel of them all like bricked
There you
up
go.
together.
There you go. That sounds safer.
As you're starting to compile your resources and find ways to do it, whoever's piloting the ship, you start to move closer to the floating debris, and then all of a sudden another shake, and you feel this EMP wave resonate out, and all of a sudden the shuttle goes boom, and then the emergency lights turn on. Folks, that's where we're going to end our adventure, as we were just getting started. But you can see the ways that challenges where you arrive to design a school becomes meaningless. Not meaningless, just a second priority. And the challenges and ways you navigate those things really accentuates the creativity. And I loved where we were going. I was excited to see what happened next. But anyway, thank you for being vulnerable, folks who stepped into the space. I really appreciate that. What did you think about it? What did you think about your game playing, role playing experience?
I'm the French teacher at Vinyl Haven School, and I am thinking it would be really fun to do like a very like elementary version of this, but that it would be like an immense amount of preparation because you just had everything ready to go for us. And thinking about what my students have for vocabulary, I think it would be really fun to try to figure out a way to work this in somehow at a much lower vocabulary level, but I definitely have to think on how that could happen.
Yeah. So Susan, part of this too is I don't have as much prepared as you might think. A lot of it is improv and thinking on my feet because I did not anticipate you trying to put your computers together to I should have, but I didn't. So part of that too is there's like a much scaled back version. This is kind of building off of I don't know if you played the shipwreck game, but let's say you're on a shipwreck and then you have a minute to figure out the items on the boat you're going to take with you, right? And that's one way you could name very specifically these very easy vocabulary things. And then once you get off the ship with your items, you have to work with each other to say, what are the top 10 items from the however many folks you have. So 100 items that you would want to pare down, and you keep scaling it down, and it's to practice. That could be one way that you could make it a little bit more simplified. And that's a pretty straightforward activity. So you don't have to have as much as intricate of a design prepared.
Yeah, that's definitely a question that comes up written, but it would be fun to kind of make it into a group activity like that.
Yeah. And I don't know, bring in a boat or so, not that you could, but go down to the water. I don't know, there's some fun ways to immerse it too and gamify it. Thanks for that question, Susan.
I was really amazed by how, even though I'm sitting in an auditorium and I'm looking at you guys on the screen, I was really amazed by the degree to which I was really imagining and seeing the space in my head. I was really seeing, imagining the ship and imagining how it looks and imagining what the airlock looks like. And all of that stuff it's just so profound how quickly we can go somewhere in our minds and how good that is for kids. just like spatial planning, like in my head, I was like, okay, how far are we? And like, what, speed do we need to go, and thrust, and like all these things that just start coming up. And I just think that's a really amazing thing, that you're just telling us a story verbally, and yet my brain is creating like a movie. Like that is
Yeah. One of the things I love this is with me and my friends, we don't have to watch Netflix. We get to create our own stories. And my mom's an artist, so like working with her now, it's like a relationship building thing with my mom where we're creating graphic novels, right? Because there's all these layers of how you can build it out. The other thing is too, if you got to the life support system, you were going to notice the measurements were kind of off, and it was by a factor of almost like 2.5, which for me was like, this is the extent of my math knowledge. I am not a math teacher. They use different measuring systems. They used metric versus the American system of measuring. And then that's how you could like file down the things to meet it. Again, not an engineer either, clearly, because I don't think that's how that works. But like, those are the ways you can weave in, or like you were saying, how fast do you need to go? If this is the distance, what is the mass times acceleration in order to get there? How does that work? What other things did you notice, feel, experience?
I liked that we all had completely different like initial approaches. When the situation was first laid out, I was like, well, we need more information. Like, we need to ask more questions. Like where do we get more info? And other people in the group were like, no, like, I'm going to go do this, or I'm going to go choose this, or this is what we need to do. And it was really interesting to not only see everybody's different perspectives on how to approach a situation, but also to like consolidate them into like a plan where we're all collaborating towards the same solution.
Your team, and teams have different strengths and weaknesses, and that's the beauty of working part of a team, is I don't look as bad with the team because someone else is covering my weaknesses. And then people do things I would have never ever thought of, and I'm like, that's brilliant. Thanks for sharing that.
I also thought too, like, as I think a lot of kids would think when we're doing this kind of goes with the silliness part, but does what I have to say is it valuable? Like, am I gonna say something stupid? Is everybody else gonna roll their eyes? Like, am I wasting people's time?
Yeah, Rob, that's so powerful, because even when we heard people, I don't know if this can work. My thing is, yeah, let's try it, right? And as a facilitator, you kind of have that encouragement thing to like ramp it up and say, whoa, computers as a wall and pocket gravity, because I don't know how this is going to play out, because the answer is created by you all. And what an empowering experience to be like, whoa, what I came up with solved the problem. We saved the day. And it was because of the thing I brought. It's a great point, Rob. James, I saw you come off mute for a second. Did you have something you want to share?
Yeah. I was just like noticing like how much thinking I was doing, and like how like quickly like everyone was just like running through their brains, like, what can I do? What can I do? And so like I think just like the engagement there, even if you didn't say anything, it was still like you were like trying to like problem solve. And I'm just thinking about implementation in the classroom. So I teach social studies, and so like I think somebody mentioned like the amount of potential, a lot of work beforehand to try and structure something like this that would be relevant to, I don't know, like a US history situation. It could easily work and be really, really powerful. I was just wondering, like, are there organizations, are people developing these sort of like skeletal systems, or is that something that you have resources for?
Yeah, so great question, and also a shameless self-promotion. So I work as a consultant, Leveled Up Learning, and I've written curriculums that are they're interdiscipline classrooms, so it's predicated around civics. So I use the main learning results to develop a civics curriculum that teaches citizenship through game playing. And so throughout the class, you do what's called a YPAR, youth participatory action research. So you do actual community-based research, pull it back into a fantasy world where you build out your own build out your own capital city, your economic structure, theology, like you build your own world. And then you use that as a driving tool to then make change in your community through a lens of civics. So you learn school board systems, you learn town government, you learn state legislator, and then you build those systems. So like in one of my worlds I predicated it off of there's an anarchical city, then there's a theological city, and then there's a democratic city. and the players get to travel between each one and see the different experiences in each. And then also they're playing and interacting with each other. So they're building characters in the world, they're creating stories in the world, so that they're like telling the history and timeline.
What was that called?
I call it character development is the name of the curriculum. And you can reach out to me. I'll throw my contact information in there so you all can reach out.
James is so happy.
I want to just recognize that we're just about at time, but this Gabe's slideshow will be in the Google folder of resources and contact information. And so just encourage, to keep that conversation going, and also a recording of this session will be available in a little while too. And I want to just remind you that we have a 15-minute break now. So the next session starts at 11:30. And in case you need it, here's the link to the roadmap. If you want to listen to the local music, go back to link 1. And then just keep an eye on where you want to be for the next session, either link 1, 2, or 3, based on your choice in the agenda. And just really want to, Gabe, give you the last word, but thank you so much for getting me out of my head a little bit and having some fun and affirming some stuff and introducing some new ideas. And just, that was a great session. Don't know if you have any final words.
Yeah, thanks, Yvonne. Are folks able to hang back? Like, if folks want, I'll be here for the 15 minutes if they're allowed to. Yvonne, tell me if that's not allowed.
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
that's fine, because you're doing the next session, so we don't need to tech you. So this is just this link will just be here. I have people in the waiting room, so I may let them in, but you all, cool. We can keep the conversation going informally for the next till 11:30.
For those of you who need to run, please go take care of yourself. Thank you so much for stepping in. The key components, right, are like that trust, that vulnerability, and then having fun. Just have some fun, take care of yourself, and find ways to do that, and invite people into it. So thanks again, folks. Appreciate you all. Have a great day. Thanks for everything that you do.
Thanks.
Thank you.